Welcome to the Holy Land Dispatch podcast.
Welcome everyone to another episode of the Holy Land Dispatch podcast. Back when I was a young man, young in years and immature, my wife and I would always find a reason to argue. We both shared similar temperament, for the most part okay, until we explode. And then all hell broke loose and we'd square off, saying too many things we didn't really mean. Our egos ruled us. The most important thing was to be right, to place the blame at each other because it can't possibly be me, can it? More importantly, while focusing on the blame game, we neglected the root causes and that only served to continue this cycle. Thank God we grew up, found God, and both, each one separately by the way, made the decision to focus on improving ourselves instead of each other. Is everything perfect now? Of course not. We are human. And once in a blue moon, Satan sneaks into our consciousness and things might escalate a bit. But we catch ourselves very quickly and won't allow this to become a thing. The group of people who drive the anti-Bibi protest for God knows how long now move from one slogan to another. It used to be the price of cottage cheese, then the housing, then the bogus trial. It moved to Bibi divides, and then Bibi is to blame for October 7th. And then of course the most cynical move yet, taking over and orchestrating the protest, quote-unquote, for the return of the hostages, as if the pressure needed to be placed on the Israeli government and not on, say, Hamas. Now most of the hostages are home. As of the moment of recording, we only have 3 dead hostages still being held by Hamas. So now the protest should stop, right? Well, wrong. Because none of the causes these people pretended to care about mattered to begin with. The only goal of all these protests was, and still is, to topple Bibi and his government. So now that the hostages are for the most part home, this group had to find the next end of democracy as we know it cause. And they seem to have landed on the demand to establish a commission to investigate October 7th. Historically, after big events and disasters, such a commission was established and appointed by the President of the Supreme Court. The most known one was the Agranat Commission that dealt with the Yom Kippur War. You might ask, well, what's the problem then? Why would these people need demonstrations? After all, it makes perfect sense that after such a huge disaster as October 7th most certainly was, we would want to investigate and learn from it. Well, I'm of the opinion that as things stand, there is a very low likelihood that we will ever get to the bottom of it. I believe that due to political interests, we're going to do this investigative need a severe injustice and endanger ourselves in the process. And the sad thing is, as always, that it could easily be avoided if reason prevailed. You see, there's a reason why the aforementioned group of professional protesters picked this as its next headline. Recently, the opposition collected the 40 signatures required to quote-unquote force the Prime Minister to answer questions, and front and center stood that commission. Netanyahu spoke about it candidly, and stated his stance, which is largely accepted by the coalition. Netanyahu claims that the commission appointed and manned by the President of the Supreme Court has built-in conflicts, in that the President of the Supreme Court is a contrarian political player, and that such a commission will come to conclusions we can all already guess. Furthermore, Netanyahu says that the Supreme Court and the President lack support from more than half of the citizens. As such, Not only do they have conflicts of interest, they also lack the mandate required to act as impartial investigators. He then presented his position as to who can and should be part of such a commission. He pointed to a relevant precedence in the US, the September 11th Commission. This one was made of equal parts Democrats and Republicans, giving it the credibility in terms of political leanings and allowing it to work in line with finding the true causes and get to the bottom of the disaster. Conspiratorial theories aside, this seemed to have worked pretty well for the US, and Netanyahu claims this is the direction in which we should go in Israel too. The opposition is of course opposing this for three main reasons. First, why should the opposition make the coalition's life any easier than necessary? Second, they certainly stand to only gain from the results of a commission appointed by the Supreme Court. We all know what those would be, so why should the opposition support any type of other commission? Fairness and credibility notwithstanding, of course. Third, and probably most important, if a bipartisan commission is appointed, it might find, God forbid, that many elements within the opposition's ranks, as well as its supporters in other extra-governmental positions of power, are named and perhaps made responsible. So before we even start discussing the investigation itself, we have a huge conflict of political interests that makes establishing such a commission near impossible. Now, there are a few avenues we might find ourselves on in this regard. One is what the coalition is trying to do. A small committee of ministers was created to define the commission, its mandate, etc. This can become the official commission, and for what it's worth, it will have credibility with a large part of the Israeli population, but not all. This, of course, can be blocked by the unchecked Supreme Court, and most likely will be. The Supreme Court could, theoretically speaking, or practically if you'd like, force the government's hand towards a traditional Supreme Court-appointed commission. Another path could be that no commission would be appointed, and at a point in time in the future, if God forbid a leftist coalition is formed, they will appoint one, caring not at all about what anyone else thinks. Now, we barely touched the who, as in who will investigate. Let's talk a bit about the what, or in other words, what should the scope of such commission be? Certainly, they need to look very closely at October 7th, 2023. What happened? Where? When? Who responded and how? What procedures were followed and which weren't? Were the procedures valid? And many other questions. Surely they need to look at the night of October 6th. We know there was a lot going on during that night prior to the attack. So who saw what? What did everyone do with what they knew? What were the operational failures and why did they occur? The list of questions relating only to those 72 hours starting on the evening of October 6th is enough to make your head spin. What else should the commission look into? Well, if you'd ask the opposition, I'd wager they'd like to frame the investigation around October 6th and onwards. If I'm pressed to give them more credit, perhaps they'd consider looking at the time leading to the attack starting, say the formation of Netanyahu's coalition. I bet they'd want to examine the impact that certain activities in Judea and Samaria might have had on Hamas in Gaza, etc. It's not very difficult to guess because they don't hide the fact that their mind is already made up. Throughout the year, they stated it again and again. The army, good. Shin Bet, good. Bibi, bad. Their first response to the attack was, "You are the head, you are the blame" campaign. In short, the opposition would love to frame the Commission's mandate in every way they can arrive at the conclusion that Bibi needs to go. And the coalition? Well, the coalition would insist that the mandate is extended far beyond all of the above. Netanyahu and some of his ministers have said it before. When looking at October 7th attack, we must go all the way back to the pullout from the Gaza Strip in 2005. In fact, we must go further back and look at the Oslo Accords. Hamas wasn't established in mid-2023, nor were his ongoing plans to eliminate the State of Israel. The PLO, those quote-unquote moderates, schemed and still do to kill us since long before Hamas. So one would be quite justified in wanting to examine the impact of those detrimental agreements on what eventually took place. Netanyahu said, "I will testify and answer all questions, but I will not be the only one." Now sure, there's a political agenda there too. Bibi is not an innocent, lost little lamb. But out of the two approaches, I'd definitely pick the latter. Positions aside though, here we have a huge conundrum. Not only is there absolutely no agreement about the who, I can't even see a reality where we agree on the scope. And while the arguments are focused on political positions, and I repeat myself, the Supreme Court is a political player in this one, no one seems to really bother with the actual investigation. Throughout the last year, the Army presented a list of so-called reports about its failures across the board. Each one of those reports read like a captain's log. All they did was outline the chain of events chronologically. This happened, then that happened, and then that happened, and the result were so-and-so dead, and so-and-so wounded, and so-and-so kidnapped. No whys or hows. The Shin Bet was only slightly closer, but based on what was exposed, still far, far away from an honest report. We're a bit over 2 years removed from the horrific event, and not only do we not know how it happened, there doesn't seem to be any real burning desire to get to this. We have a very high-ranking officer, Brigadier General Owen Solomon, besides his heroism in the battlefield near the Nova Festival, in which he saved many lives, fighting shoulder to shoulder with his son. He received the responsibility of investigating the functioning of the regional division. His investigation was very thorough, and he submitted a very detailed report, only part of which were released. Before he was suddenly released from the army for some trumped-up, ambiguous charges. His report is being shielded from the public, and no one is allowed to see what he wrote there. But we know, because he told us, that there were major problems with the way the Chief of Staff operated, in the way he understood, or rather misunderstood, the reality on the ground, and other such claims. He elaborated on those, and at the very least his claims resonate as truth. They make sense in light of what we know to have happened. His claims make great sense of something that look impossible to understand. Yet he is silent. This was what made me remember the arguments I used to have with my wife when I was an immature, selfish person. Well, at least more so than today. The people involved behave in a way that suggests they are interested in one or two things: avoid being named responsible, or place the responsibility at someone else's door, instead of thinking of what is actually needed. The State of Israel it must understand the failings that led to the October 7th attack. We also need to know what was done correctly. It is almost negligible in my book who is to blame. It's important, but far more important is to ensure this never happens again. We can only do that if we honestly reflect. We can only do that if we drop ego and look deep inside to find the flaws and fix them. I'm not convinced that we're even on the path that will eventually lead there. I feel that we're on a path that will take us to a blame game, which in the end succeeds only in marking someone or some people as guilty while leaving the doors open for another catastrophe. The opposition is, as usual, more to blame here, as they're absolutely entrenched in their boycott against Bibi. Bibi was indeed the PM during October 7, 2023. He is definitely responsible for the state of Israel. But you know what? 2 years later, it seems that not only did he not lose the support of the people of Israel, but he just might also be gaining more of it. Stop the childish boycott, like I mentioned in the previous post. I'll add a link in the comments. And let's get to the investigation. I see absolutely no reason to object to a bipartisan commission made of equal parts coalition and opposition, or alternatively appointees on their behalf. Where is the injustice in that? The coalition doesn't have a majority nor control. Why are you scared of this? The opposition would get to ask all the questions as they would be equal partners, and they'd have the privilege of actively participating in remedying things that need remedying. The fact that they reject it in itself means they are not interested in getting to any kind of truth, and are only focusing on trying to do what they always tried, getting Netanyahu to go away. Ask yourself, dear opposition, let's say you are successful, and all the investigation turns up is Netanyahu going away. What then? What did you achieve? How is the state better off in light of what happened on October 7th? What did we learn? What are we going to do in order to avoid such a disaster? For what it's worth, if Netanyahu going away is one of the results of this commission, along with an honest and comprehensive understanding of what led to it and how we can behave differently, then so be it, because it's not about Netanyahu, yes or no. I still think he's better than any of the clowns the opposition presents, but that's beside the point. The point being that the investigation must be honest and deep. We owe it to our country, to our children, and to all of the soldiers who died to protect them. I am normally an optimist, but until I see a major shift, I'm really concerned about the truth about October 7th ever coming out. That's it for today, good people. Thanks again for joining me for another episode of the Holy Land Dispatch podcast. God bless.